Shalom, shalom. This week's Parsha is Parshat Eikev, and it contains one of my all-time favorite sayings, and that is that man cannot exist on bread alone. Now, this has always spoken to me my whole life because, thank God, growing up, I had all my needs taken care of physically, and that wasn't a problem. But I did have angst. Did have this existential issue, this problem of what am I here for? What is it all about? Why do I exist? Where's my motivation and my drive to get up every single morning? And this was a big question for me, and I needed to find a higher purpose. And I looked at this pasuk as meaning that man needs to find a higher purpose in life, that you can't just live by having your basic needs taken care of. You need something, some sort of drive. And that's what I always thought it meant. But when I looked at the pasuk in its context, I see that that's a nice message, but I'm not so sure that's what God was trying to say there. And let me read it for you and expand. So the pasuk says, and I'll say it in English, it's talking about when the nation left Egypt, and we're told that they had baked breads, these matzot, that they had provisions for a while, but eventually it ran out, and they did not have bread to eat. And so, therefore, it says, and he, God, afflicted you and let you go hungry, and then fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your forefathers know, so that he would make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but rather by whatever comes forth from the mouth of the Lord does man live. So, what this pasuk is telling us that God, by design, wanted them to run out of bread. He wanted the nation to see and to understand that whatever it is that they think that that's their source, that's their bread, that's how they're going to live, and we've become dependent on throughout our history on so many different, then it would be the storehouses in Egypt or whatever it might be, and we thought that that's the only place where our bread can come from, where that can sustain us, that we can live by. God is saying that is not the case. You ran out of it here, you're in a desert, there looks like there's no food, but I, God, told you to get up and to move and to leave. And if God tells the nation to do something, there's a commandment there that he's not going to let them starve out in the desert. He's going to make sure that there's going to be a way, but the Jews have to understand and try and think out of the box and not panic and not worry and turn to God and say, well, we listened to you. Now what? What do we do from here? And so what God is showing them is that just like he can make bread grow out from the ground, we fail to see the miracle of this nowadays. When we say hamotzi, hamotzi, lechem in art, that God makes this stuff come out of the ground that we can make bread out of. That's a miracle. God can perform any sort of miracle he wants. And God made sure he gave them the manna from heaven. And this is supposed to teach man that, whatever it is, like the end of this pasuk says, it's not by bread alone, but what emanates from the mouth of God, what's God's will. So if God wants you to live, he will make sure that there'll be some way that you'll be provided for. And Moshe in this parsha talks about this in a different way. He talks about that he went up to the mountain for 40 days and for 40 nights, and he had no bread and no water. And he brings this up more than one time. And he didn't die. He made it through. God told him to go on the mountain. God didn't say, and pack yourself a little picnic basket with your sandwiches because you're going to be up there for a while. Make sure you have what to eat. And since God did not command him to do that, there was going to be a way. And we don't understand how Moshe lived for 40 days and 40 nights without bread and water, but he was sustained by God, through God. Now, I'm not saying, look, none of us are Moses, and I'm not saying we should go out in the desert without provisions. That would be silly. But God did not come to us and tell us to do that. But what we have to know is that if we do everything within our power to follow what the will of God is, what's in the Torah that makes sense to do, and we don't go against the commandments of God, but we're good, moral, ethical people living within a system, and that we follow that we don't have to concern ourselves so much, a little bit, yes, but only within the bounds of what we can do morally and ethically. But we don't have to be in a panic mode and resort to doing things that are wrong, because God will provide if he wants you to live. I've seen this, by the way, in my own life, that there are people, right, that seem to have nothing and somehow they make it through. I mean, even look at Holocaust survivors who had nothing. And a lot of them lived until, the ripe age of 100 plus. You see so many of them, and I wonder, how could that be? How could they have lived so long when they were malnourished for so many years, had nothing to eat in those conditions? It must have had a lasting effect. And then you see things about people who have the opposite, extreme opposite. I know people that have everything, the best of the foods, the best of the homes and cars and medical care and family, and they seem to have it all. They seem like to have it all. And something can happen to them and they can have that ripped away from them at any moment. Because whatever God's plan is, if God says that that person is going to live until 35, there's nothing that person can do or depend on no man. Don't depend on man. It says, don't put all your faith in man. Nothing that any man can do to make that person live longer. It's what emanates, it's the will of God. If God wills us to live a short life, we will live a short life. If God wills us to live a long life, we will live a long life. And it's not dependent, we have to do the best we can because it's our obligation to take care of ourselves. Yes, it's our obligations to work and to eat healthy foods and exercise and all this. And you want to have a good life and you don't want to be stupid. But what I'm saying is that God can provide for us in ways that we sometimes we never think about, just like the manna. No one would ever think that there would be manna coming down from the heavens. And nobody would ever think a bunch of things. So if you look at the Jewish people in the land of Israel, there are certain times that we haven't had things. And God bless these very intelligent people who have come up with solutions by thinking out of the box. They are able somehow with a machine to take what's in the air and make water. They've provided this science for us that if we don't have water coming through like by natural means the way it's supposed to, that they've been able to create it. And that can happen if God wants us to take thin air and turn it into water. He will help us to do this. But if he doesn't, it doesn't matter how much water is all around you. God can make somebody dehydrate to death if that's the case. So what I'm saying is let's try and do things right. And like I always say, morally, ethically, follow the will of the Torah, the spirit of the Torah, by doing good for ourselves and others. And God will provide whatever we're meant to have. And whatever we're not meant to have, we will not have, because it's what emanates from the mouth of God. That's what will be in the end of the day. So act morally, responsibly, have the faith, have the peace of mind, send it up to God, and what will be, will be. We will live by God's will and God's will alone. Shabbat Shalom.